You're going to stay there. You're going to come over here and you're going to let the.
I grew up in church my whole life, from the time I was an infant till I turned 18. I grew up Worldwide Church of God. My mother took me and my two brothers and my sister to church. We went to church every Saturday. I grew up going to church every weekend and every Wednesday night until I turned 18. And I believed in God. I believed there was a God, but I never asked God into my heart. I never asked Jesus to come into my heart before. So I had seen a lot of things growing up in church, a lot of family members, church members do things towards my family, say things towards other church members, and I became very bitter. I was very bitter as a teenager, and I didn't want to be a part of that anymore.
My background started out a whole lot different than Laura's. I grew up in an independent, fundamental, Bible-believing Baptist family. My dad, from the time I was born, was a preacher. I grew up in church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. Anytime the doors of the church were open, we were there. Missions conferences, revival meetings, so on and so forth. The older I became, I began to get more involved in ministry of my dad. I began to go soul winning and knocking on doors and passing out tracts and telling people about Jesus that I didn't know nothing about. I mean, I knew it in my head, but I didn't know it in my heart.
My dad, he was going to church with us, and he had finally gotten to where he would actually come with us a few times, and he was coming more and more, and he was getting more comfortable with coming to church with us. And when we were in church, somebody had said something to him out of the way, and so that made him very upset, and he never would go back after that. So my dad had never, to this day, has never been back to church since then. So that was one of the reasons why whenever I turned 18, I didn't want anything to do with church anymore.
Satan had gotten me so blinded. As I got older, I began leading a youth choir at the church, teaching Sunday school class. I had it all down to a T. I made it through my teenage years playing the game, just mastering being basically a hypocrite. And I thought, maybe Christianity, maybe all this is just a facade. Maybe this whole, I would call it God thing, maybe this whole God thing is just a figment of everybody's imagination. The Bible is just a book, no different than a fiction novel. And it's just a book that, older people believed. And now this new generation's coming on, and we're growing up and we're realizing that it's all a fake, that there's nobody really real. There is no such thing as somebody that's really saved, and there's no such thing as a real preacher. There's no such thing as a real God. It's just basically a Santa Claus.
So whenever I turned 18, I left. I started drinking, partying. I did everything I could do, basically, just rebellious. I was just turned to total rebellious and rebellion, and did everything I could to not be that person.
So I made it through 18, 19, 20, and then I turned 21 in June. In January of the following year, I pretty well just had all I could take. I was ready to go live my life. I was ready to go chase money, chase women, do my thing. I don't want to say that my life fell apart, but it was rough. It was a rough 2 years. During that 2 years, I started drinking. I'd taken my first sip of alcohol after I had left home. And that one sip of alcohol turned into being a full-blown drunk. just a full-blown alcoholic. Just one sip, thinking everything will be okay. I'll take one sip of alcohol, everything will be just fine. I just want to taste it. That led me down a path I never thought I would go, and then got totally hooked on pornography. Just one little deal led to just a full-blown addiction to pornography. And when I turned around twice, I'm looking at my life and I'm thinking, how did I get from where I was? How did I get here?
I had people that would come to my door and witness to me, but I didn't want anything to do with it. I just didn't want anything to do with God. I didn't want anybody to talk about it around me. I didn't want anybody to try to bring it up around me and try to get me involved in the conversation. I didn't want anything to do with it at all. I just tried to stay away from it.
And I remember in 2006, my wife and I were in Virginia, and we were on a four-wheeler, and we were riding through the mountains, and the brakes on the four-wheeler went out. There wasn't no brake fluid in the four-wheeler, and we were, at the time they went out, we were going down the side of a mountain, and the four-wheeler flipped and threw us off. It landed on her, landed on me, rolled down the mountain, and it about killed us. And you would have thought at that particular time, God would have got our attention. That we'd have said, okay, God, we're sorry. We're sorry for how we've done. Forgive us. But we were out 8 months. We lost everything we had. Everything. We had totally hit rock bottom in 2006. 2010, I was driving down the road doing about 65 miles an hour. And I was coming up to a stoplight and it was green. I had the right of way. And there was a 17-year-old boy coming the other way. And I believe it was a F-150 pickup truck. He was texting, wasn't paying attention. And he turned in front of me. I T-boned him at 65 miles an hour. And when I came to, I was in the hospital. And should have been dead. I mean, the vehicle was totaled. I hit him so hard that the bed of the truck was laying in the street. And I should be in hell right now. But God had mercy on me then, and you would have thought that would have got my attention. But just as soon as I was able, I was right back to partying. Right back to drinking.
We got to the point where we would drink every day. We'd drink at lunch, for supper. Every time we ate, we had to have a drink. It didn't matter. It got to the point we were drinking all the time. We just tried to drink our misery away. And the more we drank, the more miserable we got. We just kept spiraling downward.
So the morning of May 16th of 2016, I had no idea what the next 6 weeks was going to be in my life. I got up on the 16th of May just like every other day, go to the gym, come back, go to office, work, make money, drink, party, the whole 9 yards. So that morning, about halfway through the morning, I decide to, instead of going to the office, I said I'll just go to the bar. I'm just gonna go hang out at the bar all day. So I take my daughter to my sister's house, and I drop her off, and I drive up the road, and I get about a mile from her house, and there's a Harley Davidson motorcycle in front of me. And we're approaching a stoplight, and the stoplight's green, and there was a white Honda Civic approaching from the right-hand side of the road. The Honda saw me and felt like it had plenty of time to pull out, but it overlooked the motorcycle. And I was front row seat to watching that motorcycle T-bone that car and watching that gentleman flip over the hood and land on the pavement. And so I rushed up there, I got out of the vehicle, and I ran over to him, and I knelt down beside of him, and there was blood all over the pavement, and he was sitting there gasping for air. And I got down on one knee, and I held his hand, and just the look in his eyes, I'll never forget. You know, at that point, I was so far away from God, I couldn't say pray, or I couldn't pray for him. I couldn't say ask Jesus to save you or anything. And I sat there and I watched him gasp for air. And I just sat there and I thought, my God, there's nothing I can do. This guy's going to die. And he probably wasn't in his maybe 40s, maybe not even that old. He's not old at all. And I could smell alcohol all over him. And I watched him die. I literally sat there before anybody came. I sat there and held his hand and watched him die. And for the first time, I thought, that could be me. On the morning of the 19th, we were scheduled to go to Birmingham, Alabama on a business trip. My business partner and I. And so I sat on the couch and we were just sitting there talking, and my phone rang about 1:30. And I didn't recognize the number. I mean, it wasn't programmed in my phone, but I answered it. And it was C.T. Townsend. And C.T. had said, I'm in Burlington. I just started a meeting. And the Lord wants me to preach a message tonight on the events of eternity. And I need a video edited. Well, I didn't know what to tell him because I didn't edit videos. I had people that do that in our company. But something nudged me to tell him I'd do it. Needless to say, I got the video done. I got it turned into CT. Well, I thought that I could get away from it. I thought that my business partner and I could just go to the bar and we could drink and get away from it. And I got to the bar and I ordered my drink and I pulled up to the bar, and something compelled me to pick up my phone and go to New Hope Baptist Church Facebook page and watch CT preach that message. And about the time I got there, that video I edited was on the big screen playing, and CT was rolling a casket down the aisle. And the video was about a reenactment of what a lost man will encounter when he dies and has to stand before God. And this lost man was saying how he did all these good works, how he went to church, how he grew up in a Christian family, how he knew John 3:16, how he was good in the community, but he didn't know Christ. And where the Bible talks about, depart from me, I never knew you. And I sat there and I watched that video sitting on a bar stool, and the Holy Ghost just kept drilling my heart to the point to where I got up, I couldn't even drink my drink. I threw money on the bar. I told Brian I was going home. All Thursday night, the Holy Ghost just kept saying, son, I love you. Son, I love you. I died for you. Doesn't matter what you've done or where you've been, I love you. And I just kept trying to drown it out. I got up Friday morning with all intentions of just doing what I normally do. But I literally was so scared to leave the house Friday. I was afraid that I was going to drop off into hell. It was that vivid. All I could see was that man on that motorcycle hitting that car and dying and going to hell. And all I could think is, if I leave this house and I get in my car, I could wreck and die and go to hell. That's all I could think of. So I made it from upstairs to downstairs on our couch. Laura left and went to work, and I sat there on my couch by myself literally all day long, and I didn't go anywhere. I moved maybe twice, 2 or 3 times off the couch. And all day long it was just, son, I love you. Son, I died for you. And I remember it like it was yesterday, the Holy Ghost speaking, saying, I want to use you. I remember getting my phone and turning it over to, I found a website that had a bunch of old preachers on it that I grew up under. Percy Ray and J. Harold Smith and my dad. A lot of his messages was on there, and Ralph Sexton Jr. And I'd sit there, and for the first time I started listening to preaching, sitting there on the couch. And while I was sitting there listening to that preaching, the Holy Ghost would say, son, I love you. And I want to use you like I used these men. Just as vivid as I'm sitting here talking to you. And I'd sit there and I'd cry and I'd weep. And Satan was in one ear saying, what's everybody gonna think? You can't get saved now. Look at all you've done. God can't save somebody like you. You're just a hypocrite. And then he'd say, you're gonna lose everything you got. You're gonna lose your family, you're gonna lose your business, you're gonna lose everything you got if you do this. And the Holy Ghost just kept saying, I love you. And I want to use you. And I want to do great things with you. And I can't get that out of my head because I remember it like it was yesterday. And even sitting here now, it's just almost like it was 5 seconds ago. And just as plain as any voice that, just any 2 people talking, it's like he was sitting right beside of me talking to me. And he kept saying as I listened to those messages, like, I want to use you like those men, but you got to trust me and you got to accept me. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to give up my sin. I didn't want to give up my partying. I didn't want to give up all that stuff. And about 3:30 that afternoon, he quit speaking to me. And my first thought was, I've made it through this. I'm good to go. And I still sat on the couch, and I laid there for a little bit, just thinking and pondering. And I guess it was about 5:45, 5:30, 5:45. He spoke one more time. And this time he said, if you don't accept me now, I'll never speak to you again. And just as clear, just as clear as the sky's blue, he said that. And it's like you took a ball bat and hit me upside the head. I realized that very second, I realized that for the first time in my life, I realized I was lost, going to hell. I knew just as sure there wasn't any doubt. At that particular second, there wasn't me sitting there trying to weigh out in my mind, well, am I really this or this? No, it was just as clear as anything. At that second, I knew I was lost and going to hell. And I hit my knees right there. I didn't have to be in a church service. I didn't have to sign a card. I didn't have to have a preacher there. At that point, I had totally been broken by the Holy Ghost. He broke me. He showed me I was lost. He broke me. And the moment I made the effort to get down, I surrendered. And I remember saying, Lord, I'm just a wretched preacher's kid. I'm just a wicked preacher's kid. I'm worthless. I'm a nobody. But God, if you'll save me, and you'll change me, I'll give my life to you. And I remember just like it was 5 seconds ago, I got up off my knees and the weight of the world felt like it had been lifted off my shoulders. All that sin and all that hurt and all of that bitterness, every bit of it, just talking about it now, it just brings back, just like it's yesterday, all the bitterness, all that weight on my shoulders was gone. And all of the truth that had been sown inside of me for so many years, all the times I'd heard preaching, all the times I had sat in church services, it all made sense. All that stuff I made fun of, all that stuff I said was just not real, it was fake and phony, it all for the first time made perfect sense.
I'll never forget May the 20th when I received a text from DR. He sent me a text. He said, baby, you gotta come home. And I immediately thought there was something wrong. I said, what's wrong? He said, nothing's wrong. He said, I've got the best news of my life to tell you. And I was like, well, tell me. And he was like, no, I want to tell you in person. And so I thought, okay. I was like, well, he's not going to tell me. So I sent back a text again. I said, go ahead, just tell me. And he was like, no, I'm not going to tell you. I want to tell you in person. And I said, okay.
And so needless to say, she knows everything that I do. I put on Facebook, and I'd put this on Facebook the moment it happened. I'd done 3 things. I had put it on Facebook, then I called my dad, and I called CT. And I called my dad, and just the sheer joy that I heard in his voice. 33 years of prayer had been answered.
So I know DR. I know how he is. And so I knew he had probably posted it on Facebook. So I went to Facebook, and I looked, and sure enough, he had posted it on Facebook. It had already went viral. And he said that he had just gotten saved. And it took me by surprise. I was like, what? And so I made my way home, and I hadn't sent any other texts to him. We hadn't talked. I made my way home, and I opened up the back door. And as soon as I walked in, and as soon as I saw him, I knew there was something different. I could see it all over his face. He was just kind of glowing. He didn't have to say anything to me. And I just started crying. And we embraced, and he just told me that he loved me, and he told me that Jesus loved me too. And so we sat on the couch for hours and talked.
And I began to apologize for how sorry of a husband I had been, and how pathetic of a human being I was. I mean, how I'd wasted all those years. And at that point, I had peace in my heart. God was going to save her. I just didn't know when.
And then he said, I think we're going to go to the Burlington Revival at New Hope Baptist Church on Monday night. That was May the 23rd. And I said, okay, I'll go. And we went in. We sat on the very back, far right-hand side against the wall. It was packed. There was probably 900 people there that night. And DR hadn't spoke to Brother CT. He didn't know we were coming. And after the singing, Brother CT had DR come up and give his testimony.
And so I go and I get up on stage, and I don't remember what I said. I know I told my testimony, but I honestly don't remember what all I said. All I know is that the whole time I looked back, and it's like the Holy Ghost had Laura singled out. And the whole time she was just crying.
And as he was giving his testimony, I knew God had been speaking to my heart all weekend. I had watched the yard. I'd seen the change in him. I could see he was different. And God was speaking to my heart. And DR come back and sat down. And no more than he got sat down, I grabbed him by the arm. We went down to the altar. And I asked Jesus to come into my heart. It was the best day of my life. I've never been the same since.
The day after she got saved, on the 24th, Holy Ghost spoke to me again, and he said, "You remember what I told you the day I saved you?" And I said, "Yes, Lord, I remember. I remember you saying that you want to use me and that you had big plans for me." And I honestly didn't know what he's talking about. He said, "Well, I want you to preach." And I said, "God, I can't preach." He said, "Son, if you'll just trust me and you'll follow me and you'll let me direct you and you'll just do what I say, I'll use you like you can never imagine. And I want to use you." And he put something in my heart that day. I can't explain it. I can't describe it. But he literally drained me of all of myself, of all of my desires that I'd had before of making money or having a successful business or having this or having that or having a big retirement. Or he literally took all of that away and replaced it with only one desire. And that desire was to be used by him and see people saved. I can't explain it. Literally 5 weeks went by, and I'm struggling every day because my dad called it bootleg preaching. Every Sunday or Wednesday I was somewhere giving my testimony and preaching, but I had not announced my call. And on June the 28th, and I'll never forget this day, CT and I, Jared, were coming back from a youth camp that morning, and we had stopped by the tent. We were going to go eat lunch, and I looked over at CT. We went right by the tent. I said, "Hey, you want to pull in for a second?" And we were going to eat. He's like, "You know what? Yeah, let's pull in for a second." So we pulled in, we got out, and I don't know, but as soon as we walked under that tent, there was so much God under that tent. I can't explain it. Brother Danny Buchanan was there, and Brother Randy Hobbs and Brother Jeff Mabe and a couple other men. They were standing around talking. And we got down there to the front. And I can't tell you what happened the next 2 hours. But that day, on June the 28th, God changed my life. He changed my life from a salvation standpoint on May the 20th. But on June the 28th, from a ministry standpoint, he changed my life. And literally 3 days later, on July the 1st, God gave me the green light to announce my call to preach. I prayed, I said, when God said it's time, tonight's the night, I said, "God, put your seal of approval on this. Show me something, show me a sign, give me your seal of approval on this." And CT looked over at me and gave me a thumbs up as if that God had told him tonight's the night. And I knew at that point he and I were on the same page, that the Holy Ghost had told us the same thing. And he got me up there and I announced my call, and God just met in that service. He put his seal of approval on it. There were 43 people saved that night. And just the seal of approval on what God was doing. And from that moment on to where we are now, I look back and just the sheer power of God and the sovereignty of God to take a lost preacher's kid and a lost girl from West Virginia, put them together, let us go out just so far. There were things that we could have done that would have literally destroyed us. And God only let us go so far, and He'd keep us from doing it. But He let us go so far to get us to a point to where He'd save us, call me to preach, launch me in a ministry, and change our life for time and eternity. And He did every bit of that in 6 weeks. Just 6 weeks.